Hello, hello. Everyone, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the publisher and executive director at Orion, and I'm super excited to welcome you all to this celebration of Orion's special expanded summer 2026 issue, The Deep Dive, Our History and Future with the World's Largest Mammals. I think it's gorgeous. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you all. So, a little bit about the issue. The deep dive explores humanity's enduring relationship with cetaceans, from the violence of the whaling industry to the nuances of whale song. Contributors trace our evolving entanglement with the world's largest mammals, how we've been a threat to them in the past, our intertwined struggles in the present, and what we might do to ensure their continued survival. Featuring contributions from our three guests today, as well as Alexis Pauline Gumbs, Rachael Cusick, and Josephine Woolington. The issue asks not only how we have shaped whales' existence, but how they've indelibly left their mark on ours. A few quick words before we get rolling. Hopefully, most of you know our work already, but for those who are newish to Orion or want to learn more, we are a 44-year-old independent nonprofit that publishes writing and art at the intersection of nature and culture. Through our print magazine, which was a National Magazine Award finalist this year, through our digital stories, book anthologies, our workshops, and programs like these, we aim to invite people into a community of caring for the planet. As a nonprofit, we rely on the support from our readers and our donors to keep us going. We're currently finalizing production on our upcoming autumn issue on the science of taste and flavor, which will be followed by a special archival issue that we're calling From the Vaults. I invite you all to learn more about us at our website, ryanmagazine.org. There you can find ways to subscribe or donate. You can follow us on the socials. You can learn about upcoming writing workshops. You can sign up for our email newsletter that goes out once a week. All of us at Orion, we look forward to welcoming you into our community. Today, we're also happy to offer a 20% discount on any one item purchased from our shop. That includes a subscription or a gift subscription, any book, merchandise item, or back issue, including the summer issue. The coupon code is Deep Dive, and we're going to drop it into the chat in a second so you can check out some stuff on our website. Little housekeeping, and then I'm looking forward to introducing our moderator and panelists. Along the way, we'll drop other links into the chat. But for starters, I want to quickly read a little bit about who we're going to be hearing from in just a few minutes. Vauhini Vara is the author of Searches, Selfhood in the Digital Age. This is Salvaged and The Immortal King Rao, which was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. Her journalism has appeared in The Atlantic, The New Yorker, The New York Times Magazine, Business Week, and elsewhere. She lives in Colorado. Dr. M. Jackson is a writer, glaciologist, geographer, science communicator, National Geographic Society Explorer, TED Fellow, three-time U.S. Fulbright Scholar, and the author of 4 award-winning general science books, including The Ice Sings Back and The Secret Lives of Glaciers. And finally, our gracious moderator and friend, Meera Subramanian, is an award-winning journalist whose work has been featured in such publications as Nature, The New York Times, The New Yorker, in Best American Science and Nature Writing, and of course, in Orion, where she's a contributing editor. She's the author of 2 books, A Better World is Possible, Global Youth Confront the Climate Crisis, which was out earlier this year, and The River Runs Again, India's Natural World in Crisis, which was shortlisted for the Orion Book Award. A National Geographic explorer, Meera has received numerous grants and fellowships and teaches creative nonfiction at Sewanee School of Letters. So Meera, Vauhini, and Em will each give a short reading at the start here, and then they will be in conversation for about 30 minutes, after which we'll take questions from the audience. Please submit your questions through the Zoom Q&A function rather than in the chat. As a reminder, the event is being recorded today, and we'll have a link that we'll send out later so you can view it at your leisure. So I think that's it for me. I'm going to step aside, handing it over to Meera. Thank you all so much for being here, and I can't wait to watch and enjoy this conversation. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil. Welcome, Vauhini and Mem. Let's just start by setting the mood and just reading little snippets from our pieces, which are all kind of big and complex. So we'll just give a little taste in case people haven't read them. Em, do you want to get us going?
Ooh, I would love to. I'm going to read from my essay, The Other Endurance. It's an essay that explores pregnancy whales, South Georgia Island, and it's adapted from a chapter from my upcoming book called Wild Islands. So for those who want to follow along, we're talking about page 76. I'm going to start from the second section, and here we go. I'm tucked up into a mossy ridge arched like a whaleback, listening to the low static hum of the wind whipping my ears. Below me is the Lyell, a long flow of snow and ice, mostly blanketed in debris and sediments from a rock side off Paulson Peak. I'm on South Georgia Island, one of the most fiercely spectacular places on Earth, some 1,200 miles north of the East Antarctic coastline. I've taken a few hours away from the ship to stretch and walk alone through the island's de facto capital of Great Viken, then up the ridgeline to say hello to the Lyell before I return to speak about what whaling and exploration did to this place. I'm a scientist, a geographer, a glaciologist. I research and write about remote glacier landscapes and the communities that live with ice. But in this very moment, I am not any of that. I'm just me. And I sit for a moment with the Lyell, soften my eyes and let my mind wander. And as my mentor at the Geographic, the geologist Ford Cochran used to tell me, listen with the landscape, not at the landscape. The sounds of a place don't need to be consumed. As I drift, my thoughts circle back to my own body, to what it has learned to hold, to bring into the world. And slowly the Lyell loosens and the wind thins, and what rises is not ice, the glacier coughing melt, but water. Songs of this place from before, when millions of bodies moved through surrounding seas, all of these voices, all this knowing, and I'm no longer alone. Years ago, an Icelandic friend told me a story from when she worked as a ship's chef. How one day at sea she witnessed a whale give birth. The mother was surrounded by three other whales swimming slow, deliberate circles around her body. My friend called them midwives. The infant's tail emerged first in a cloud of blood, and then sometime later the wrinkled body itself. It was weak, my friend said, and two of the midwife whales swam to it, nudged it, helped lift the baby to the surface so it could take its first breaths. The third stayed close to the exhausted mother, and that mattered because no sooner had the cow given birth with a burst of hormones and blood than several male whales arrived, jostling for position. The sea turned chaotic. As their boat moved away, my friend said she did not know how that mother could have given birth without the midwife whales holding space around her. Stories like my friend's appear again and again. Laboring whales surrounded by other females, calves lifted and protected, mothers shielded while they recover. None of these stories describe a whale birthing alone. To be forced to do so would be a violence. We'll pause there.
Thank you so much, Em. This is such an absolutely stunning and beautiful piece. Thank you for reading that. Okay, I guess I'm going to go next, and then we'll pass it to Vauhini. I'm going to be reading from my piece called Black and White, which I'm exploring the pursuit of wanting to see orcas, which I never quite do. Neil, I'm jealous that you write in the beginning that you have seen them multiple times, but it's also about family and kind of losing some people, and also being the daughter of my mom, who's of European descent, and my dad, who's an immigrant from India. So we've been kind of all over, but I'll start here at the top of the second column on page 45. I have left Texas, left my family, left my crumbling country. I sit on the coast of southern Spain, losing faith that the bordered land of the United States is my pod at all anymore. There is no escaping the news from back home, where killer men dressed in black, faces covered, seem intent on proving the inferiority of human intellect to what I am learning about orca intelligence. Let's compare the brain of two apex predators, the orcas and ours. While we have one auditory center in our brains, orcas have two, likely for echolocation and perhaps for language. At the top of the orca's brain, above the crease of the cingulate sulcus, is an entire paralimbic lobe that humans lack. This lobe is unique to cetaceans, a highly elaborate crenellation of brain mass that connects emotions and memory and learning. They have the third largest brain of any creature on the planet, an amalgam of blood vessels and nerves that orchestrates spectrums of thought and sound that reach out in every direction. Everything about orcas is social. They create complex networks that last lifetimes. They have cultural traditions of language and foraging. They hunt cooperatively and form intricate alliances. Females pass through menopause and live long past their reproductive years, guiding the next generation. To be human has long been to imagine our superiority, not only to other humans deemed lesser, but to all animals who aren't us. We use tools, it was believed they do not, until Jane Goodall witnessed chimpanzees dipping the stems of plants into termite holes and curling their lips around their quarry, or until a video of a cow scratching herself with a broom goes viral. We have emotions and societies animals have been presumed not to, until Telequa passed her dead calf to kin, and they carried their burden together. We humans watch what we can of orca life. We see what they do. We imagine grief. We imagine love. We imagine rage. But we don't have a clue, only clues.
I love that, Meera. And I love, and I hope we talk about just like the questions that the three of us are all circling around, having to do with like our capacity to know something of what it's like to be another species, and also like everything that's destructive about the human desire for that kind of knowledge. And that's, I think I'm going to read a little piece from my piece that's sort of about that as well. So my piece for Orion is about this ongoing huge die-offs of gray whales, which started in this current sort of wave started in 2019, which is when I actually started reporting on this article. And then it was for this magazine that folded, and I thought, all right, I guess the story is dead. And unfortunately for all of us, this die-off just continued and continued and continued. And so I felt really lucky to get the opportunity to revive it and write about this die-off for Orion. But what I'm about to read to you comes from a trip I took in early 2020, right before the pandemic, to Baja, where I was learning about spending time with researchers who are researching this die-off of gray whales, and also was spending time with tourists who were hanging out with the gray whales out of, love of gray whales and a desire to be near them. So let's see, I think the two people I mentioned here are named Fisher and Hill. Fisher is the manager of this camp where I was staying in Baja, and Hill is one of the tour guides who stays there in the winter to help with the tourists. A few weeks before I showed up, Fisher told me he had seen a dead whale floating near his camp. He didn't know what had happened to it and didn't want to get close enough to find out. Then, maybe a week before I arrived, he had awakened one morning to learn that the newest dead whale had drifted close enough to become his problem. Beached whales are generally left to decompose. Fisher and the tourists would just have to coexist with this one. For me, this whale here is no good, he told me moodily. In a few days' time, he made a surly expression. The smell. Hill pointed me toward a damp and secluded stretch of beach scattered with the delicate bones of dolphins. I discovered the whale lying on its right side, facing the lagoon in an oily maroon pool. It was enormous, 40 feet long and bloated, its skin grayish pink with uneven stripes of white down its sides, left by seabirds flying overhead. It smelled of spoiled seafood, that sour kelpiness, but amplified. I thought of it, for no verifiable reason, as a he. I had gone whale watching only a few times in my life, in Washington's San Juan Islands and South Africa's False Bay, but never had I been anywhere near this close to a whale. The scene, grotesque as it was, radiated a strange holiness. The mysteriousness of whales has always attracted me. Unlike other wildlife, they can't easily be found and followed, and most species are way too large and restless to be held captive and studied. But here I stood next to one. Here was his massive head, his lolling, blackened tongue, his blowhole close enough that I could push a finger inside if I wanted. As with any unrequited romance, this one was accompanied by a fierce and unearned sense of ownership. And when a group of tourists from Campo Cortez passed by on a stroll with Hill, I bristled. A long-haired man in shorts remarked on some holes in my creature's back, from which blood had seeped. Propeller wounds, he said. No, said Hill. Shorebirds feeding on the corpse must have pecked them. The tourists continued on their way. To the extent that outsiders visit the San Ignacio Lagoon, which is remote enough to deter all but the most devoted whale watchers, they pay to commune with live whales, not dead ones. The only sound after that was the buzzing of flies congregated around my whale, drawn especially to his tongue. His left eye was glazed over and pointed upward, and his flippers pressed together, giving him a look of mournful penitence. I drew close to him and pressed my fingers against his flank. It felt rough, like an old tire. I stayed there for a while, observing him from all angles in perverse admiration before returning to camp.
Thank you. Thank you both. Where to begin? I'm going to start by, well, one, just admiring this. I was teaching down in Tennessee for the past 6 weeks at the School of Letters. I see some of my students there. Hello. And so I didn't get to hold the magazine until last night when I came home to a pile of mail. And it's just so beautiful. For anybody who's not a subscriber, you should subscribe, because just reading these, I read these online, but then I was like, oh, this is just so beautiful to behold. So thank you for that. But the on the way back, I just stopped yesterday, and at the Yale Beinecke Library, they have a whole exhibition on Rachel Carson right now, which is really spectacular. And I read there that in 1941, when her very first book was coming out, which is The Sea, Under the Sea Wind, which grew out of an Atlantic piece, she told her publisher that her idea for the book here, and I'm going to quote, "As far as possible, I wanted the reader to feel that they were, for a time, actually living the lives of sea creatures." And I just thought that was so beautiful, how here we are today and on the pages of Orion with the summer issue, really enacting Carson's legacy, and also sharing the frustration that she must have felt having to write that. And here we are 75, 80 years later, and we're still trying to write stories and put things on the page that help people see this in a different way. So I just want to thank you both for doing such a beautiful job with that, and thank Neil and Taja and all the whole team at Orion for making the space where we can keep these stories and conversations alive. So you both have sort of touched on it, both in the story and in your intros, but I would love to just hear any more about like the origin, like the story behind the story. I always find those so fascinating. So Vauhini, you did share a little bit about the travel story and the magazine folding, which we love when that happens, right? But do you want to share any more about your connection to the gray whales and their disappearance?
Yeah. I think like and many of us in this room and many who are watching have always just been fascinated by whales. You know, I did like a third grade science fair project about them, and my favorite book is Moby Dick. And so I'm always just like, anytime there's any article that I see online having to do with whales, I'm going to click on that. And so that was how I learned about this die-off of gray whales in 2019. Unlike the two of you, Meera and Em, I don't often write about nature. And so it was very much a departure for me to propose writing about these gray whales. The reason I did it is that I happened to get an email from somebody who was doing editing for this magazine that Airbnb had running for a few years in late 2019. And she was like, you know, I think we'd worked together in the past. And she was like, hey, do you have anything? And I said, as a matter of fact, like, if you'll let me, I have this story I want to do about a die-off of gray whales. And so it was through that I was able to go down to Baja and start the reporting for this article. But then, like I said, the pandemic happened and Airbnb was like, you know, magazines, not exactly, that's not something that we're willing to spend resources on. And so they killed the magazine. They killed the magazine and the story as part of that. But I just, you know, out of personal interest, continued to follow this story. I had talked to so many researchers in 2019, 2020 when I was reporting on this. And so I kind of like, I didn't have alerts, but I would like go and Google what they had been saying, or I would go and watch their YouTube, you know, videos. over like the 6 years after that. And then when I found out that Orion was doing a whale issue, I emailed my friend who has worked with Taja, and I was like, please hook me up and put us in touch, so I can propose this whale story that I want to revive. So that's how it all came about.
Oh, that's great. I mean, sometimes that is surprisingly common about these circuitous routes that stories take before they really emerge. So thanks for sharing that. I'm glad it finally found its place. And so much better than Airbnb magazine. Totally
100%.
agree. And what about you? I mean, you mentioned that this is part of a larger work, so tell us more.
Yeah, I do spend a great deal of my time writing about the environment. I'm trained as a scientist, right? I'm trained to be able to build these categories, and I spent a lot of my life doing that. I've had the absolute exceptional fortune of having the National Geographic send me all over the world, and it seems like wherever we are, if we're measuring, monitoring, predicting, we're able to isolate science. And a few years into my career, I started to wonder if that's a little bit of some of the problem that we have. It doesn't seem to matter where I am. We are not working very well right now on this planet. We are not working with our planet. And so spending a lot of time trying to figure out, well, how do we address all the possibilities of answers? The one thing I started to think about is what happens if, as a scientist, we start to reach for language outside of science? What happens if we start to blur those lines a little bit? I was just speaking with a colleague who had read my essay and said, well, how do you know those are midwives? How do you know the whales are midwives? We don't. But that's some human language that I can reach for to potentially build a bridge between what is observable and everything else. Every personal experience that so many people might or might not have. How do we build bridges and connect? And for me, the last years, I've been working on different places and pieces that really want to blur that distinction between over there and me. I really want to think about what we can learn from the more than human world and then really overlap this incredible diversity of possible lived human experience onto that. I don't know if that is the answer for all of our problems, but if we have a little bit more care, a little bit more empathy, a little bit more understanding, which unfortunately, I don't speak whale. I don't know what a whale's lived experience is. But right now, I'm really trying to get all of my colleagues, all of humanity, to understand a whale. And so we have to reach for the language we all know, which is humans' language.
Great. Thank you so much. I have a dog speaking, so shut that window. Yes, so yes, I don't know what it's saying, but it doesn't sound very happy.
It
Um,
does impact us.
but all our stories, okay, so there's such wonderful overlap and intersection between not only our stories, but just the whole issue holds together so well. We're exploring family and connection. I just said I came from teaching and the whole like the sensory sound and putting that in. There's just so much sensory elements to the stories. But we're also maybe all guilty of anthropomorphizing, but I'm gonna like throw that term out. And again, reaching for Rachel Carson, it feels like what we are all attempting to do, and I want to hear from you. I know that's what I'm trying to do, is not put us on the animals, but try to animalize us humans, that we are just forgetting that we're animals all too often and that we're trying to do something that is stepping into the shoes, again, to invoke what Rachel Carson was saying about to really just be in that space where you can imagine another way of being in the world, even if it's really challenging for us. So I just wanted to hear both of you talk about how you approach that. And maybe this time, Em, do you want to go first?
I have a 4-year-old son, and I am there when he is outside telling me, Mom, I'm a rock, or I'm a tree, or I'm a whale. And then I have to shift and be a whale with him and be a forest with him. And I love it. And I am there for that. And it helps my brain reconsider it's normal paths. I go wandering in the woods and I start to categorize everything. And so instead, I sit with my son and I get to have those moments where I get to be a whale. I get to be a forest. And I think it makes me a better human and helps my brain grow just a little bit. And I look at all of our pieces, which just reading both of your work is was a stunning pleasure for me. And I see us all reaching for family. I see us reaching for different ways to understand and blur those connections. And I'm all for it right now. There's all the criticisms. Meera, you lightly touched on them. There's all the criticisms of doing that, but I think there's more benefit. I think it allows us to have those moments of, wait, but what if? And I think that benefits us.
I was curious in my piece about like the relationship that I have to others who have exploited whales, and the natural world outside of the human animal. What I mean by that is, I read that little section about me being fascinated by this dead whale. And on the one hand, there's something really beautiful and like generative about the human curiosity that leads us to be face to face with a dead whale and interested in like walking around that whale and touching it. Um, but then also like it was deliberate on my part to call it on the page my whale, because of course, hopefully as a reader or as a listener, one thought you have while hearing that is like, that's not her whale, um, because because I think somehow like that human curiosity can also be bound up with a human desire to own or to kill, right? To see like the product of our own ability to destroy, um, which we describe as like our ability to invent sometimes, right? Or like make something out of natural resources. Um, and so in a way, I think like what I was especially interested in my particular piece was like my separateness from whales and like my desire to bridge that separateness in the way that like my desire or the desire of the tourists I was with who were whale watching maybe is actually bound up somehow in the desire of whalers in the mid 19th century, and the people like the ones M is writing about in that essay, to like go and dominate whales, right? Is there something about being human that like is a common thread there? Um, so yeah, I was interested in that difference.
I love that. And especially reading your piece, there is a fascination with something that is in a death state, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is a process of transformation that our forests are going to go through, our bodies are going to go through, whales go through. And I feel like regardless of what it is, we're all staring, poking at it. There have
Mm-hmm.
been so many essays of late about whale fall, right? Like that idea, everyone's super into it. And I keep thinking about it because it shows life after. I mean, there's a lot you can look at that. And in South Georgia, there is so much whale fall, right? That it has made this whole ecosystem even more vibrant, right? It is alive and growing. It's what kickstarted. If you go there today, it's it's hard to remember how it used to be. And that's why I think I try to write about it very graphically in this book, because how it is now, first read, is vibrant and thriving, and uh, it's our planet for the flood, right? It's all of these things, but it has to have started with all of that whale fall to get to where it is now.
Right, that's beautiful. I mean, both of those ideas tap into like also the idea of just like separation of treatment. And this is a question for you, Emma, of like you do such a beautiful, deft, light touch of not being didactic about resource extraction in terms of the parallels between how we do that from women, essentially extracting babies in this sense when you are like bringing Clara's story to life of that she is just, brought down as a tool to make babies and do the laundry and this extraction, while simultaneously there's this total slaughter happening of the whales from the ocean for blubber and all the other resources. So I mean, how do you approach this as you're thinking it on the page in terms of drawing these comparisons, but also not doing it with too heavy a hand?
I don't really have a good answer for you, Meera, because this is something that I am continuously thinking about.
Yeah.
When I am down in South Georgia, everyone wants to talk about Shackleton. They want to talk about polar Western white male explorers and the power of such narratives. And that is what is practically grooved into the bedrock there when you are down in the poles. And I don't know if it's my job to say enough. I do think that I want to spend as much time as I can entering into spaces and saying, here are these other stories. Clara Lett's not the only woman that was on South Georgia, but I find her story compelling. I find it very, very workable. The idea of being there for so long and having all of these children, but wait, we just need to talk about the real endurance. Let's talk about Shackleton. And so I find that I don't have to, Mira,
Yeah.
unpack what all of that means. I think a lot of people are already, the two of you, you're smiling. You get it. We're there. I think I can hint, and then
Yeah.
that's okay. And then I can use my space and my breath and my words for what's next. Who else I might have an opportunity to amplify.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Um, this was a question that I had, and Vauhini, I reached out to her behind the scenes. I reached out this morning, like, I know this piece is not about AI at all, but Vauhini has written about artificial intelligence a lot, and I'm already seeing popping up in the questions this question about language and
Mhm.
communicating with whales. And there has been a lot of research they are doing. I found a paper this morning that I shared with you that basically scientists are deploying underwater microphones and robotic fish. They're recording the whale vocalizations of humpbacks and sperm whales. Like we've been recording whales for ages, right? But now we are using AI to try to identify what those vocalization patterns mean, to try to understand their meaning, to try to boom them back and get into conversations. And this opens up all sorts of ethical and moral, huge questions. So Wahini, I know this is not your exact area, but I'm just curious, since you have really been given great thought to AI and its potentials and its risks and everything else, if you could just speak to share with us what you think about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think people in this group, those of us like on screen talking, but also those of us, the participants who are watching this, are probably especially attuned to the way in which like science is narrative, right? And so I think about that in this context. I think about how it was about 10 years ago that Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, was doing this interview, and the person asked him, like, hey, it looks like the pursuit of AI is going to require enormous use of of energy and water, is going to have take a huge toll on the environment. So why not take all the money that you have and invest it, in this problem that we're already facing, rather than contributing it to it? I'm paraphrasing, and I don't think the question was that pointed, because it was at like a tech conference. And he said, well, what I think is going to happen is that AI is going to become so good that we can just go to it and ask, hey, how can we stop climate change? And it'll tell us the answer. And therefore, AI is actually the best investment I can possibly make, right, in solving the climate crisis. I bring that up, even though it has nothing on the face of it to do with whales, because I think that narrative, we can see this idea of AI being used to communicate with whales as belonging to that same narrative. So there's this like future we can imagine in which AI has been developed that can somehow go some way toward translating the way that certain species of whales vocalize into some language that humans can understand, right? Like, there's already some science being done toward that. Maybe it's advanced. And then we can imagine people like the CEO of OpenAI or Anthropic or Google or Microsoft or Amazon, or the president of the United States, right? These people who are in positions of power being able to say, listen, It's not the case that all this investment in AI is inherently bad for the environment. Look at this case study in which we're able to actually do it to save the whales, right? And already you see some glimpses of that. So I'm not super familiar with this line of research, but there is research that uses AI to determine where whales are in the water. And they're using it in the San Francisco Bay, for example, to figure out where whales might be so that ships don't strike them. And there's this movement in California now to say, hey, let's actually relax some of the regulations we have around how ships are traveling through the bay, because we actually have this technology now that can solve for the problem we're trying to solve. We don't need to worry so much about like the numbers of ships that are in the bay at the same time and where they are, because we can just use technology to figure out where the whales are, let all the ships be there, and just use the technology to get them in the right place. So you can see like the slippery slope we go down. And so it's a kind of a complex answer to your straightforward question, Meera. But it is true that like AI can be used for all kinds of things, including potentially to decode certain ways in which whales communicate, and yet we have to view that as part of a broader narrative.
Yeah, yeah.
Wahini, did you watch Project Hail Mary? Because
I just watched it on a plane.
I have been absolutely amazed at the amount of people have reached out to me and been like, oh, wait, so this can happen for whales or glaciers or, anything, because there's exactly what, 20 seconds it takes to suddenly have the main character talk to an alien, decode language. Suddenly they're clearly communicating, and it's fantastic. And so it's probably here going to take like 15 seconds, and now we're going to be able to record enough whale sounds and then make a language, imply meaning, and go forward, right? And it touches on that. Like, I think for a lot of the AI conversation, it's a value-based conversation. AI is entirely good, AI is entirely bad. You can take the word AI out of it and say climate change is entirely good, entirely bad. But that ask, can we have this nuanced reimagining of what it all looks like with these things, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what you're touching on, yeah.
and
Wait,
also we know
can I
AI
add one more
is.
thing that I forgot
Oh
to
yeah, yeah,
say that
please,
people
please
might
Do
be
it,
aware
yeah.
of, but I kind of took it for granted. I know Meera and Em, you'll be aware of this, but some people might not, which is that for gray whales in particular, for example, climate change is, as I write in my article, is like the reason that there's this massive unprecedented die-off of gray whales occurring right now. So to be clear, like this idea of like AI could be good for whales, there's like a very direct link between the effect of AI on climate change and the fact that that is responsible for what's happening to these whales.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so important to recognize that. And I really loved that paragraph that you had. This was on page 28, where you ask this question: when you suspect that a whole species is imperiled, not by a harpooner or even by a boat, but by the sudden and unprecedented transmutation of its vast habitat following decades of environmental violence for which no one in particular is responsible, how can you begin to define the threat, let alone corral the political will required to meet it? I thought that was so powerful. I write about birds a lot, and this comes up in the exact same way. I was like, wind turbines are bad, windows are bad. It's like, yes, yes, and we are transforming entire ecosystems that is very difficult to pinpoint, quantify, or academically research even to get the like numbers, but it's so big that it's really hard. And the whole question also of AI is, we all know, like, all the bias that goes into developing those systems, the bias of what we hear, and then would we even listen if they didn't say the things we wanted them to say? Like these other questions that unfold because we've rationalized a lot of other behaviors over time, and we would probably continue to do that same. We just have a few more minutes before we want to open up to larger discussions and questions from the audience. Sound, I just want to come back to this. I touched on it in the very beginning, and especially your piece really leans into sound, but it is there a lot in the throughout the issue. You write, voice is how bodies survive when vision fails. And there's something so powerful about going to the ocean and trying to understand it. And we are so limited by visuals, and we're such human land-based visual creatures that this kind of lends itself to leaning into the sounds of everything. And you write beautifully about this. You're talking about missing the sound of your mother's voice. This, even the details of the sound of ice changes across the course of the day when you're walking on it with crampons. And so I just wanted to hear you talk a little bit more about how you think about sound.
Thanks, Meera. I think that's a really interesting observation. It has to do with the book, Wild Islands. This is a book that I've been working on for years, and it explores South Georgia Island. It explores Adak Island in the Aleutian Chain, and then Iceland in the North Atlantic. And it thinks about all the different ways that we engage with these glacial and post-glacial landscapes. But the heart of this story is the story of my son, and my son has episodic hearing, so at times he can hear, and at times he cannot hear. And so I spend a fair amount of my time thinking about a world where he isn't hearing, and what does that look like?
Mm,
And then how does he experience that world? I cannot tell you what goes on in a blue whale's brain. I can't tell you fully what goes on in my son's brain, but I spend my time thinking about it.
mm,
And I do think that the scale of the challenges before us on this planet are just immense. And I feel like at times, especially when I'm teaching students, they are so immense that it's really easy to back away.
yeah.
And I write about how to lean into yourself, how to think through some of these, take a beat, take a pause, think about this other brain, this other living thing in these other places. And for me, an entry point into that is
Mm,
what we can and or cannot hear. And
mm,
particular to my background as a glaciologist, I think a very surprising thing for people is the unique soundscape that comes with ice. Every glacier on our planet sounds different.
mm.
We haven't recorded it, we don't have a baseline, and it's changing with climate change. This is an area we could study. And so I want to be able to preserve some of that. And what led me into really focusing on that is my son. Thanks, Mira, for asking that.
Thank you, thank you. Oh, I very much look forward to that book. Um, should we?
Let's do some group questions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So please just put your questions into the Q&A if you haven't already. I'm also seeing a couple in it looks like Terrence was asking in the chat. Let me just go ahead and you asked specifically about in my piece there's a section about the Mediterranean, the whales that are ramming boats. And so I explore more on that, and we have no idea. That little segment that I read about we are just speculating and guessing what's going on. Researchers do not know. It's so easy to be like, they're pissed off. They might be, or they could be bored and playing. We really do not know. They have been able to figure out some things that behaviors that that sailors can do to minimize the chance that there's going to be an incident and an interaction. But and that part I kind of love because sailors are doing that, and so I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. They're training us to behave in the way that works. And so that's this one way for us to like listen to them. I write about that we don't listen until things get violent, and this is one expression of that. But they really don't know. This is the Mediterranean orcas are it's a very small population. There are trends on sea as there are on land, and so one orca decided to start doing this, and the other one started to do this too. And the Telequa that I touch on, and other stories mention as well about that happened in the Puget Sound, where the mother carried her dead calf for I think it was 17 days with the help of her kin, because she just wasn't willing to let it go. That was something that hadn't been observed before, but it has been observed since in the same pod. So there's behavior that's being learned. And I write about like what rituals are being born. We don't even know. We don't have any idea, but something is happening. But there's no easy explanations. You can't say they're angry. You can't say they're having fun. We don't know.
There's
um,
beauty to not knowing, isn't there?
yeah, there is beauty in not knowing. Uh, let's see. Okay, Steve Billow is asking, over 40 years ago, I studied with John Lilly, but have since come to really hate some of the things he did with dolphins and LST. Like to know what the panelists think of John's work in the 21st century. Yeah. I mean, I think that's that he was pushing the bounds of what it's right to do to other creatures, whoever they are. More thoughts on that, or?
I think that ethics and science, there is the we could, but should we? And I think as this is a position of hope as a scientist, that as we evolve, we start to realize that there is a more than human world around us, and the answer for could and should becomes a lot clearer. Star asked a question along this lines of I'm interested in whales as hope, and whale watching as hope in action and a theme in all the articles. And what does whales as hope mean to you and to us as a species? And I think about that question because often when I'm giving public talks, uh, there's this moment where I wish I had specifically studied whales throughout my PhD and not glaciers, because I'm going to spend my whole life trying to advocate for ice and I'm never going to see the results of the work I do, right? That time scale is so much longer. But for whales, you can say, I'm going to do these actions, and in a decade, these metrics are going to prove that these actions, the efficacy of these actions, these ones are not, right? Whales have the ability to hold and carry hope. And I think that that is so critical today. Meera, you've been around the geographic, you know that old um, mission that was so strong there for a long time with knowing comes caring and with caring comes hope, right? This idea that we need hope. Whales can help swim that to the surface. And that's an important thing for a lot of us nowadays.
Yeah, thank you. Vauhini, anything to add?
Well, I was just gonna say, in some ways, like I like thinking about the indifference of whales to us, the
Yes.
way in which and partly physiologically too, gray whales in particular, because that's the species I know from doing this reporting, are really resilient. They have lots of different things they can eat. They have lots of range. They can go to all kinds of different places. There are some gray whales increasingly that, instead of going to the Arctic where things are getting messed up, for reasons that M would be able to explain to you all better than I could, instead of going all the way up there, they're just stopping in the Pacific Northwest and hanging out there to feed, right? And so I think, like, I in some ways, like, I find hope in the way in which like animals other than humans are tenacious and creative and intelligent, and like those orcas who we don't understand, who can train humans, as you described it, Meera. Like, they know what they're doing, and hopefully, like, that allows us to feel a kind of respect that is maybe a prerequisite to be able to, like, be a
Yeah.
little more humble ourselves and not try to dominate and own and change everything, right? So I think about it that way in the context of whales.
Mm,
I love that.
lovely. This question is for M, the one from Anonymous. I love the National Geographic's collaboration with ABC for the USA 250th. Did you feel it was a successful effort to bring attention to natural beauty and preservation?
I mean, I don't know what the metric of success is, but I will tell you that anytime we are shining, we're amplifying, we're saying we live alongside an incredible planet. We don't live, exclusive of it. So how do we think about how we continue to live with and alongside? I'm there for those efforts. I'm there for that writing. I am there for those shows, for those talks. Uh, I particularly was looking at the post-glacial history of Niagara Falls.
Wow, nice. Vauhini, in your piece, you quote Francis Gouland, instead, what we're trying to do now is to curtail human activities that harm whales. What are some of those human activities, and do you know how those efforts are going?
So for context, basically, the instead is in reference to, in the past, we could say that whaling was hurting whales, and then we could ban whaling, right? Or come up with these international treaties to say, let's reduce whaling. Later on, for example, there might be like entanglements of whales in ships and their nets and equipment. And so we could say, let's have our ships operate differently. Now what's happening is that it's climate change, and all of the range of human activities that are contributing to climate change, which is like just so much of what we're doing, in particular in a country like the United States, where we have big houses and we travel by plane and we use our cars, right? So when you ask what are some of those human activities, it's actually all of that, which is overwhelming to hear, because what I'm saying, or what this researcher Frances Gulland was saying to me, is basically it's driving our cars, and it's running our air conditioning, and it's using our big washers and dryers, and it's flying in airplanes, and it's having our big massive houses, right? um, and Frances Gulland expresses some, you know, optimism that is very tempered by the recognition that we all are continuing to use all these resources in a way that is contributing to climate change. So I would say, do you know how that those efforts are going, you asked? And so describing the activities the way I did, I would have to say that the efforts are not going well. And yet, I don't think anybody in this room would take that to mean that we should all give up and there's nothing left to be done, right? We all know that things change because we change them. And so we can see this as an opportunity to approach it differently going forward.
Yeah, I would add also the being on Cape Cod, this is a big issue here in terms of IFAW, International Fund for Animal Welfare, is based here, and they do a lot of work with whales. And entanglements and boat strikes are like, we know that those are killing whales, even separate from like the increasing problems that Vauhini writes about. And it is really fascinating and complicated, and I encourage people to like lean into those complications about what is affecting ecosystems. Here, that there's been a very big fight about offshore wind, and it's kind of amazing watching conservative elements be very anti-wind, and suddenly they care about whales, but they only care about whales because of the sounds that are coming, that when wind turbines are being installed, that it causes a lot of sonic noise, which is definitely not good, but it's also a temporary thing that you're doing to try to alleviate the climate change that is so it's like this whole cyclical thing. But there is you just have to watch. There are definitely a lot of organizations here in Massachusetts, I know in New Jersey as well, that deeply care about whales suddenly, but only in one lane, and then not about ship strikes and entanglement. That there are a lot of methods for avoiding that, but they cost money. There's line free fishing. There's different ways to avoid some of the things that we really know are happening, and there's people working towards trying to get those implemented.
I
Um,
think
yeah,
I think
go
that's a
ahead.
really good point, Mira, because I feel like again, you can go in so many different directions and so easily, and
Hmm.
then you don't have a focus point. I do think that's actually a really important solve, is picking what your focus point is and then working like hell for it and advocating for it. Not in a way that dismisses all the others, but saying, like, this is the area I'm going to work in, and I will collaborate as much here, and then we go together, versus getting spread so thin that then you're responsible for everything. And that's no good either.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, Daniel Reese has a question. He made everybody can see the Q&A, is that right?
I cannot, so, or
Only
I can see
us.
some of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll read it. In the mid 80s, I released a 45-minute film concerned with our relationship to the natural world, focusing on elephants, Ganapatiya spirit in the bush.
Hmm.
During 2 years of production, I filmed elephants in natural settings in India, Africa, Thailand, and in circus zoo captive settings. It was often a heartbreaking experience, but I came away with not only an abiding love for this extraordinary animal, but an abiding sense that there was intuitive intelligence was fairly unbounded and unregarded. I wonder now, with your own experience, can you comment on these qualities in the whales you have studied and encountered? Yeah, I think that is there through all of our stories and explorations. Just I mean, even just the little segment that I read, that they have this entire Paralympic lobe that we humans don't even have. We don't even know. We're not smart enough to figure out how smart they are, basically. but other thoughts on that? We're kind of just have a few more minutes to try to get a couple more questions in.
Mira, I've been often told I have an odd sense of humor, and I think that everyone's sense of humor should be just like mine, right? We are the ones who are determining if something else is intelligent or not.
Yeah.
Um, uh, we have an additional audience member. I think the arguments that are all about, is something smart enough?
Yeah.
Is something intelligent? Is it intelligent in certain ways?
What
We are
is
the
intelligent?
determiners of that. I'm gonna wait until it's a two-way conversation between us and whales.
Yeah. Yeah.
It feels bound up with that next question too, actually, from Laura Bailey, who
Yeah.
asks, how does the ease or lack thereof of access for humans to visit with whales change how we create genuinely intimate and emotional connections with cetaceans, which in turn might make it less abstract when we ask ourselves to take actions to protect them? Those two questions feel very much in conversation. Because, you know, in the 70s, when there was all this activism around saving the whales, it was in part because some activists were really successful in getting people to think of whales as like a charismatic, quote unquote, species that we found cute and attractive and beautiful and interesting and fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like the fact that, not to bring it back to technology, but like the fact that we have become as humans like more and more distanced from the rest of the world around us,
Yeah.
you know, I think has been to our detriment. When I say our, I mean our collective, us and other animals and the rest of the natural world's detriment.
And then your essay, it folds that distance, Vauhini. It brings in that space and says, how do we get closer and closer and closer? Yeah, that's one of the most powerful things.
Yeah, and I would argue it's just through the storytelling that we do that, and then by the simple act of just going outside, like just becoming connected to even a creature that is just in your backyard. You just kept practicing, working that muscle of empathy and relation and recognizing that we are part of the system. When it's too hot outside, like go out and be hot. Don't go in and just isolate yourself from it because you can, because all the birds and everything else that are out there, they can't do that. So like just letting yourself have the moments of discomfort to, to build that. But hopefully through the storytelling. Laura, thank you. You're one of my students down in Sewanee. So like I'm just going to advocate for the stories like what are here in this issue to really help us feel these experiences and feel this empathy, because it is challenging when they are far away and you can't interact with them directly, and then even in the interactions can be fraught. Ecotourism is can be a tricky industry where it can be great to have that connection be bridged, but then it can also be fraught if it's not done well. Okay, I think we have we might need a few minutes at the end, but I think we can probably take one more. We are facing a crisis situation in Florida and the Gulf of Mexico, with ESA protections being cast aside to accommodate oil drilling and the Rice's whale status as a species being denied, right? Is there any analogous situation somewhere else that can provide a model for winning back protections for the Rice's whale?
Mm.
Vote? uh, yeah.
In a way, I think a lot of us know the story of Taligua. We know the story of carrying a dead baby because so much spotlight was put on it, so much amplification. Being able to think about different ways you can amplify Rice's whale and get it out, I think is a huge way to, it's an effective use. We did. Give me one second, okay? We're
In
just
just our last few minutes, do either of you have anything else you wanted to share? Closing words?
Thank you, Meera. Thank you, Em, for your gorgeous and thought-provoking and moving work, and Meera for shepherding the conversation.
I could talk to you two all day long.
I
Thank you
know.
so much.
Yes, thank you, and thank you to everyone who showed up on this afternoon. I'll just paraphrase from Em earlier when she said, like go out, be a whale, be a forest, be a rock, and enjoy the natural world, because there's still so much abundance around us. So enjoy it all and keep reading these stories.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you
Bye
all.
now.
Thank you.